If I leave now, nothing will change, will it? There will be more disappearances.
Yes, I am afraid that is correct.
For the past 2 months, I have been absolutely fascinated with the story of Gregory from Security Breach. And so today, I'm going to be piecing together all of the information and data that we know about Gregory to give you my final opinion on what I think about him moving forward within FNAF. And so let's start off with the obvious, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Security Breach basically opens with us right in the middle of the action. Glamrock Freddy discovers Gregory within his chest cavity and is trying to figure out what is going on. And for whatever reason, Gregory is already on the alert and does not want to get caught by security, which is strange because if this is just a child who has overstayed their welcome at the Mega Pizzaplex, why wouldn't you want to talk to security? You could go home and go back to your family. But Gregory here is very scared of security, specifically Vanessa, and he ends up recruiting Freddy to basically help him escape. Now, Freddy isn't always there with him the entire gameplay of Security Breach, however, Freddy does help him quite a lot with communications through the Fazwatch, as well as from time to time being able to be around to help him escape the other animatronics, who were basically alerted by Vanessa to hunt down Gregory within the Pizzaplex. And at this point, that was all the context we had about Gregory, a child who is scared and not wanting to get caught by security at the Pizzaplex. Now, how does the game end? Because that could help give us some more clues about who Gregory is. Well, just like we all know with FNAF, there can't just be one single ending. Actually, within Security Breach, there are over 6 endings, which is a lot for one single game. And each one is a little bit different from the rest. If we play the game straight through and don't end up doing anything extra, we can leave through the front doors and are given this comic book style animated ending sequence. In this specific ending, we can see Gregory running away from the Pizzaplex. However, later on that night, while Gregory is sleeping within a box covered up by newspaper, which actually reads on it, local residents continue to disappear, Vanny is seen approaching Gregory sleeping. Now, what this ending could be implying is that Gregory was recaptured and was brought back to the Pizzaplex.
Now, while the other 5 endings of Security Breach are important to FNAF, I'm not going to be covering them for the sake of time today, mainly because of what we're actually covering in today's video. But just to be clear, there are 6 endings and it's been pretty confusing on which one is actually canon. But I do think that there are 2 things we can assume about Gregory himself from all 6 of these endings. For one, Gregory very much does want to escape the Pizzaplex, and for 2, it doesn't seem like he has any friends or family that he is connected with. And also what's interesting is Gregory never talks about his family ever throughout the entire gameplay of Security Breach. He never says anything like, oh, I want to go back to my family, I need to get back home. He's never talking about that, which I find very interesting. Now, after the release of Security Breach, a lot of us were extremely confused on what the story was trying to give us. It was then that we found out through Scott Cawthon himself that there was miscommunication between him and Steelwool about what the actual story of Security Breach was supposed to be, and that there are pieces of Steelwool's story and Scott's story mixed in together in one single game. This then led into an entire new FNAF era of theorizing amongst the community, because everyone was trying to figure out what the story was, and ideas were being thrown at the wall all the time. Ideas such as, what if Gregory was actually a robot and that explains some of the things from the game? We, the community, were desperately trying to figure out what was going on. And it's at this point that Scott Cawthon then stepped in to help explain things in his best way possible. Writing another book series, yes. But this time it was their own separate group, they weren't connected to Fazbear Frights, instead they were called Tales from the Pizzaplex, and to be honest, they're my favorite book series that has been written on FNAF thus far. Now, one key thing to consider here is Scott had told us about Frights that some of the short stories within them would be directly connected to the games. However, with Tales, we weren't really told anything about them, so they could be canon, not canon, or kind of both.
And this was a debate for a long time amongst the FNAF community on whether or not Tails was canon or not, until the release of Secret of the Mimic, which directly contradicted some facts about Edwin Murray and the creation of the Mimic that were told to us in the Tails series. So it became very clear to many of us that they definitely weren't 100% canon. However, it's possible that aspects of the story were canon, such as the Mimic being canon. It's talked about in Tales, and it's also in the game. So therefore, there's possible aspects that the books talk about that can help us solve the game's timeline. And just to clarify, that is truly what I think about Tales and how I will be using it as more supporting evidence rather than factual evidence for the game. Because one of the tales from the books is called GGY, and it can be found in Book 5, The Bobby Dotson Conclusion. And what is covered within the story is so oddly specific, it has to mean something. Here's what the story covers. We follow the main character named Tony Becker, who's a curious middle school student who loves to investigate things very much similar to that of a journalist. He has two friends at school, and their nicknames are Boots and Dr. Rabbit, or Rab. The reason why they use these silly names is because they are in a creative writing class, and they are tasked to write a fictional story together, and so they chose these pen names. Tony, who is more grounded, he enjoys writing more about actual real life events and doesn't really like the idea of wasting so much time writing fiction when he could be writing something real. And it just so happens there is a mystery amongst the town that he wants to solve, and it's the mystery of GGY. At the local Mega Pizzaplex, at the high score of a ton of the different arcades in the arcade, someone with the initials of GGY keeps beating the records on these arcades by an abnormally large high score. No one has ever seen a GGY play, no one has any connection to this mysterious person, but it keeps on happening, and Tony wants to figure out who that is. And so he decides to do a little bit of, quote, creative writing for their creative writing class. He's going to investigate the Pizzaplex and GGY and write the paper about it, however, add fictional elements to the story to make it not seem like it's a real thing. That way he can pass the assignment. And so Tony visits the Pizzaplex and talks to people to try to figure out what's going on with this weird, mysterious person, GGY. Upon Tony's investigation, someone contacted him anonymously using the username Morgan99. This person had found information that was showing that someone was altering the AI animatronic code of the Glamrock animatronics at the Pizzaplex, and that the programmer had left behind a signature consisting of repeated G's and Y's, connecting it with the high score of GGY. As Tony then investigates further, he finds out that someone had stolen a play pass and had hacked it to be upgraded to security level clearance, and that this person was gaining access to tons of different employee-only areas, and that this card had been used after hours of the Pizzaplex. And upon further investigation, Tony uncovers the fact that the school that he goes to has had several counselors missing. Each counselor had worked with the same mysterious student before vanishing. And Tony realizes that those names of the counselors appeared in connection to GGY and the play pass being used to access the Pizzaplex after hours. He then concluded that something happened to these counselors because they discovered something about this person, GGY. It is then revealed towards the end of the book that the friend of Tony, who went by Dr. Rabbit, his real name is Greg, possibly short for Gregory. And Greg invites Tony to meet him at the Pizzaplex later, and that they will get him cheered up. And that's the end of the story, hinting to the fact that Greg is actually GGY and is the one behind everything. Now you can very much see how oddly specific this story is. Now, what is it that it can connect to in the games? Well, when we play Security Breach, we can actually find 16 discs, which have on them recorded sessions with therapists with two different patients, one of which is Vanessa, and the other person, who never speaks a word, has went by the name of Patient 46.
And throughout the dialogue of Patient 46 CDs, we learn that this person is very experienced with computers, hacking, and that technicians have had an issue at the Mega Pizzaplex with their animatronics, causing them to go more rogue. And that all of that was traced back to Patient 46. Also, from some of the dialogue from the therapists, it sounds like they are speaking to a child on multiple occasions.
You don't want me to get in trouble, do you? I could be put in the corner for a timeout. Yeah, you think that's funny, huh?
But also, you can notice something very strange about these CDs. Multiple times throughout listening to these tapes, the therapists change because they say that their past therapist went missing or something happened to them. And the final therapist reveals to Patient 46 that actually 2 of the therapists have been found dead, and one of them, their body has been pretty banged up. Yeah, this is basically exactly what was happening in the story GGY. Many people to this point have theorized that Patient 46, GGY, and Gregory are all one and the same character. But then you have to ask, what the heck was going on? What was Gregory doing? Well, throughout the therapist CDs, it's made pretty clear that it seems that Gregory's parents have unfortunately passed away. However, it sounds like Gregory made up a story about how tragic of a childhood he had and how terrible his parents were to him. However, as one of the therapists clearly states, that was a lie, and Gregory had good parents and a great childhood. And from the sounds of it, he no longer has parents at the moment. Which could explain why, after he escapes the Pizzaplex in the first ending of Security Breach, he doesn't seem to have anyone he can go to. Now, I also just want to throw out there that if a child doesn't have family stability, they can easily be a lot more vulnerable to ideas and people and a lot of bad things, which we'll get into here in a moment. Now, it also seems in Security Breach, Gregory has a knowledge about something wrong happening at the Pizzaplex. Gregory knew about people going missing and that it was going to keep happening if he doesn't help. Which I think gives us a little bit of context to why Gregory even went to the Pizzaplex in the first place. So if Gregory is just this kid whose parents went missing and he's just stuck in the Pizzaplex, how come he's connected to GGY and the fact that he's hacking the animatronics, making them more aggressive, or causing multiple therapists to go missing? And I believe that answer lies within Glitchtrap. Who is Glitchtrap, you may ask? Well, that's a topic for another video. But in a nutshell, Glitchtrap is a digital version of William Afton. Whether or not it's his actual spirit or just an AI program mimicking William, or both, that is left up for debate and I will do a future video on. But one thing we've learned about Glitchtrap ever since his debut in Help Wanted is he loves to control the minds of humans to make them do things for him. AKA Vanessa, Jeremy, and probably multiple other people. Well, who is more impressionable than a young child? After all, William Afton already had experience with gaining the trust of children. He's murdered many of them, and especially one whose parents had passed away. And it's entirely possible that with the knowledge that we know Gregory has about the disappearing children at the Pizzaplex, he went there to investigate and try to figure out what was going on, and was actually kidnapped by Vanessa, or Vanny, who would have been already under the control of Glitchtrap, and made him a part of Glitchtrap as well, and was starting to be used by Glitchtrap to do evil things throughout the Pizzaplex with Vanny for some bigger end goal, which we hear about from the very first trailer from Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach.
You will do as I say. You will bring me what I want. And if you fail me, then you will. Both of you burn!
It's been theorized that this voice that we hear is that of William Afton or Glitchtrap, talking specifically to Vanessa and Gregory, trying to get them to do what he needs them to do. And what that thing is still up in the air. But with that being said, I believe that when Glitchtrap is possessing Gregory, Gregory is able to do things that he typically can't do. Things like being a hacker or coding or trying to gain people's trust by acting innocent. These are all things William Afton would have been good at and therefore is doing through Gregory. And I think it's even possible to say that he was using Gregory to lure children who we hear about who went missing at the Pizzaplex. However, I'm not 100% certain as to why these children were lured here and went missing. I think that's something that could come to light later on. But with that being said, I believe all of that was taking place post-security breach. The possession of Gregory with Glitchtrap, Gregory and Vanessa working together on Glitchtrap's behalf, and then we get to the gameplay of security breach. I believe something happened that caused Gregory to either snap out of his possession or Glitchtrap just left him. He was done with Gregory. And I think it's safe to assume that within the process of Glitchtrap leaving Gregory's mind, or Gregory found a way to get Glitchtrap out of his mind, that it caused probably some mental damage and memory loss, which is why I think Gregory sometimes acts like in Security Breach he doesn't really know what's going on and needs help a lot. However, there are key things that he does know. For instance, being scared of Vanessa right off the bat. If Vanessa was the one that captured him in the first place, he would be very much wanting to avoid her as well as the other animatronics. And it would also explain why Vanessa is trying to get Gregory and capture him again. She's trying to put Glitchtrap back inside of him to make him be a servant for him forever. And so while I yet believe there are still things that need to be polished out about Gregory and his story, I do believe we have the rough edges of what actually happened, and we can finally say, yeah, Gregory makes sense in Security Breach. I'm just really excited and looking forward to the next games that Steel releases, and hopes that we'll get something from around that time period of the FNAF franchise. Whether it is a Security Breach prequel or sequel, I just think it would be absolutely awesome to get more context around the story that Scott Cawthon and Steel was trying to tell us within that game. And so with that, make sure to check out this video where I uncover the biggest secret of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which is the Night 6 phone call. I'll see you over there. Have a fantastic day.